Right now, let's talk NBA Finals. Keith Smith NBA on Twitter. As here we go, rocking and rolling. It is the Raptors and the Warriors. Keith, welcome back, pal. How are you?
I'm doing great, Mike. How are you?
All is well. I'm interested. First off, I want to get your opinion on this. If you're starting a team, you going Kawhi, Durant, or Curry?
Steph Curry, I think at this point still, he
Ooh.
doesn't come with the injury issues that Kawhi does. I think Kevin Durant is, he's a guy you kind of have to build a little bit of a team around. The Warriors were an exception for him to go there. But Steph, you can just plug and play him on any one of the 30 teams, and you're going to be a much better team than you were the day before.
Now, that's interesting.
Without a question.
That's interesting because the poll question we have so far, just got it up, 16% went Curry, 28% Durant, 56% Kawhi. And I wondered if it's because the Sixer fans just saw Kawhi kind of take it to them, if that's why they went that way. But Curry was down the bottom. Now, my question was, if Curry and Kemba switch spots, how many games does Charlotte win?
Oh, easy 50.
50?
Yep.
You think Steph is that big of an improvement over Kemba?
Yeah, and that's not to any slight on Kemba, but Steph is one of these guys who he has just an effect on the game as both a playmaker and a scorer and a shooter that just doesn't, no one else has that same impact on games the way he does. It's really, when you watch him play, everything defensively ends up so focused on him, and that's playing with other great players. But the defense ends up, they watch him. They're always peeking to see where he is. Do they need to send help? Do they need to get out on him and those kind of things? He's just a force unto himself.
Wow, that's pretty interesting there. What about – now, Durant's interesting because in Oklahoma City, they made it to the finals with him. Now, he had great pieces around him. But since he has left, they had very little playoff success. So what is to read of what Durant could do if he was the clear-cut lead dog on a team?
Yeah, I think you're looking at him putting together huge numbers, but you're going to have to get some guys around him that can help him get the right shots, get to the right spots on the floor. That's not that Kevin Durant is not an incredible player. There's points in time where he may have been the best player in the NBA this year. But the challenge for him is I don't know that he is at a point right now where he's going to do it so much all by himself. I think you've got to have another guy out there with him that can help set him up and make life a little bit easier on him, just because, it's always a little harder for a wing to get all the great shots he wants. And, he's not going to be bringing the ball up the floor and setting himself up quite as much as, a guard can do for himself.
Yeah, Durant's interesting. When do you anticipate seeing him back in this series?
Yeah, that's the big question everybody's kind of wondering. For a long time, I thought it would be probably Game 3 when they were back at home. Now I'm starting to wonder if he's going to play at all. When we're starting to hear these reports that he's not really doing very much basketball-wise, you're asking a lot of a guy to really come back in that short order. I think it might depend maybe a little on how the series goes, but I think the Warriors are also smart enough to know, hey, there's nothing to be gained by pushing this guy to come back till he's ready. It's just not the right thing to do. So we'll see. I still am hoping he gets back this year, but I'm starting to have doubts. We might not see him again.
Keith Smith, do they need Kevin Durant for this series?
Yeah, I don't think they need him. I think they can still win this series without him. I think that's how good the Warriors are. They've still got three, truly great players and then a handful of role players around them. And it sounds like they're going to get Cousins back at some point, which, should be helpful, provided that, they put him in the right place and he's, got the right mindset as far as being out there. So I think that they can still win without him. It obviously makes it a lot easier, but that's the world the Warriors have been living in for at least a few years now.
Now, what is your take and opinion on, how these teams are, how the Warriors team is different with Durant? I mean, there's some people, they're better without Durant. I mean, they're certainly different, but what version of them is a better matchup against Toronto?
Yeah, I like that you said that they're different, but not necessarily better. Because anytime you talk about better without Kevin Durant, that gets a little crazy. But they do play a little differently. There's a lot more ball movement. They go to a lot more pick and roll type actions. They go to some of their pet sets that have kind of disappeared a little bit over the last couple of years. That they started out with. One of my favorites is when they run Thompson through a set of screens with Curry right behind him through the same set of screens. You can feel it from watching it. The defense just starting to panic because that's just impossible. But for how they match up with Toronto, they're well, what it does is it allows Kawhi to hide a little, and hide's a weird way to put it because they're talking about arguably the best defender in the league. But you can put him on a guy like Andre Iguodala and tell him, get your little bit of the rest, especially with the effort he's having to put in offensively. And then at the end of half and at the end of game, you can put him on Curry or Thompson, whoever you need to, and trust that he's going to be okay and fresh to handle that. If Kevin Durant's out there, you obviously don't have that ability. You have to pretty much put him on Durant and say, all right, you got to guard him, and that makes it a little tougher on Kawhi. So that's where you can see kind of the chess match forming with Durant and without Durant.
Right. Keith Smith with us. Yahoo Sports covers the NBA at Keith Smith NBA. Let's go through some of these interesting matchups here because you start with Kawhi. Who matches up with Kawhi from the Warriors defensively? Do you just go Iguodala, or do you got to throw a lot of different at him?
Yeah, I think you're going to see a lot of different looks. I think you'll see Iguodala get him for a while. I think you'll see Klay Thompson to go to Alfonso McKinney off the bench. I think those will be the primary three guys who are out there on Kawhi, and that'll be what it looks like for the vast majority of the games here, because it's one of those where what you're trying to do is you're trying to task him with slowing him down and making it hard on him, because he's at that point where you really can't stop him. You're just going to try to slow him down as much as you can.
All right. Now, you got this is another interesting thing here because the Warriors, I don't know who you count as, who is their secondary scorer in your mind? I mean, the Raptors.
It's Kyle Lowry. I think it's still the kind of other key offensive player for them.
So you go Lowry as the second guy there. So who gets that assignment? Do you go Curry on him or do you go Klay on him?
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I think they might go with Thompson on him to start games. One thing that has worked on Lowry on occasion is by putting size on him and making him have to, really become a more perimeter-based player versus being a driver. Mm-hmm. And that can sometimes work. A lot of that's dependent on if his shot is falling or not. So we'll see. Curry will get some time. They'll also, have Quinn Cook check him on occasion off the bench, those kind of things. But I wouldn't be surprised if they focus on putting a lot of size on Curry, using Sean Livingston on him at times when he's in the game. On Lowry, they're putting Livingston on him when he's in the game. So I think that, could make a difference.
Interesting. All right. So what happens with Siakam? What do you do there? He's been such an interesting up and down guy in this series. You got Draymond Green still as a possibility. Who gets the Siakam role?
Yeah, I expect it to be Draymond Green has that cover to start out games. I think the Warriors will switch a lot, especially 2 through 4, because the Raptors are pretty switchable for a team like the Warriors, so they'll be able to do that. So I think that's what you're going to see them do there. And then when the Warriors downsize, then it's probably McKinney, Livingston, whoever it is that comes in. Iguodala will pick them up at that point. But I expect the Warriors to start big against Gasol, probably with Bogut or maybe Looney, maybe Cousins if he's back and fully ready for that type of a role. So I think you're going to get Green on Siakam to start games.
I was going to ask you about Cousins. What's his story and what kind of, what does he add to this series? Because he is definitely a very intriguing guy where you've got Gasol and you've got Ibaka. That to me, that adds a very interesting twist.
Yeah, absolutely. All reports are that Cousins wants to play, and it sounds like he feels like he's ready to go. What I would do if I was the Warriors is I would let him play, assuming that he is ready, but put him out there and put in a reserve role and essentially say, all I want you to do for your 10 minutes each half is go out there, play as hard as you can. If you commit fouls, don't worry about it. It's not the end of the world. Even if you foul out, it doesn't matter. I just want you to rebound, defend, and then give us some points in and around the rim and do those kind of things, because I think that's going to be really important for the Warriors to try to, steal that little extra offense when they can, especially when they go to their reserve groups. I wouldn't start him. I just don't know that he's going to be ready for that. You're asking a lot of a guy who had, quite frankly, only had a couple of months or so with the team to really get ready for this point. So I would bring him off the bench and hope for the best from there.
Now, Keith, interestingly, the Bucks, I'm not saying the Bucks are comparable to the Warriors. They're obviously a much better team, the Warriors, in terms of accomplishments, but their styles, they like to shoot. They both like to bang threes away. The Warriors are much more versatile. But having played the Bucks, do you think that is a nice help for Toronto in that, hey, they saw a team that really likes to shoot the three, for a 6-game series?
Yeah, I think there is something to that maybe that you can draw from it, because the Warriors certainly do take a lot of threes. But whenever I think about the Warriors, I go back to something that Frank Vogel pointed out a few years ago, was everybody focuses on the threes with them because of Curry and Thompson and Durant, and the fact that, some of those threes are coming from 4 and 5 feet behind the line. But what really kills you with the Warriors is the layups and the dunks. And what ends up happening is you get so focused, especially in transition, of building out to the three-point line, that the next thing you know, there's a guy standing under the hoop that you weren't prepared for, and he's putting in the easy one. And that's when the avalanche really gets created, because there's no way to defend against that. So I think that's something that makes them, next to impossible to cover. So, they're a little different, because you're not going to have a Giannis who's handling the ball primarily. What you have to do against them, and it's far easier said than done, especially me saying it here, from the far sidelines, is you just got to stay focused. And if you're going to switch, you've got to be connected. You've got to make sure everybody knows what you're doing, because one guy left open is going to be an easy basket for them.
Yeah, and that's interesting, because you mentioned Giannis. It seemed that he was the only guy the Bucks had that really could put the ball on the floor and get past you, and the Raptors kind of sat in the middle of the lane for that. They're not going to be able to do that here, where, hey, go ahead, take the ball to the basket, and then we'll just go out on everybody else, and hopefully they're not shooting the ball well. It seems that the Raptors are going to have to come up with a completely different defensive type of game plan because of the athletes that the Warriors possess.
Yeah, exactly. The whole build-a-wall approach, you don't need to do that against Golden State, because that's not their game. While they do drive and kick actions a lot, and they're not going to ISO with one guy and spread the floor. A lot of their stuff's based on movement. It's both ball and player movement. It's, it can be really hard to do, but if you can, take a handful of possessions, especially when their main guys are in the game, and don't watch the ball, which I know is really hard to do. Watch what they do off the ball offensively. It's just incredible. Their movement, their cuts, their precision, everybody kind of flowing and going exactly where they want to go. It's like no other team in the league, and that's how they create so much of their offense.
Keith Smith, talking NBA Finals. To you, are the Raptors the Warriors' toughest test in these playoffs?
Yeah, in these playoffs, I think they're going to be. I think the Raptors are functionally deep enough. They have their 8 guys. They know who they are. They trust them. There's no real holes within those 8 guys, and I think that's going to be really tough for the Warriors. The Raptors bench has to win these games for them. They're going to win the series. If they go out there and they play even with the Warriors bench, or they lose, the Raptors just don't have a chance. And I think that's going to be, something that's going to be tough for the Warriors, because they're just not as deep as they have been, especially with Kevin Durant out of the lineup.
We're talking with Keith Smith at Keith Smith NBA, Yahoo Sports, Real GM, the NBA Finals. Gasol's interesting because he gave the Sixers problems and to some extent the Bucks some problems. Do you think he and what he brings to the table gives the Warriors problems, or does this kind of play into what the Warriors have at that position?
No, I think he can give them a little bit of trouble, because you're going to be asking Andrew Bogut or Kevon Looney or DeMarcus Cousins when Gasol's out there to defend all the way up to the three-point line. And Looney can do that, but Cousins and Bogut, they're not really overly comfortable hanging out there on Gasol, and that's really what he's become. And what I think Toronto is going to do is I think they're going to put a little bit of the Warriors stuff right back at them, but they're going to do it slightly differently, whereas, the Warriors use Draymond Green as their primary primary playmaker quite often at the top of the key. I think the Raptors will do that with Marc Gasol, and you'll see them running guys like Green and Lowry off screens and Kawhi off some stuff, and that could open up a whole bunch of offense because Bogut, Cousins, they don't really want to be out there on the perimeter. Now, when they downsize, that's where it flips the other way, and I expect at those moments of the game, that's when Ibaka is going to be in there instead of Gasol, because you don't want Marc Gasol trying to defend Draymond Green out there making plays around the arc.
Yeah, and, this Raptors team, it has been heavy Kawhi, but Keith, and you can, add some depth to this, they really kicked it into another gear in that Bucks series when Van Vliet got going. And if you didn't watch the Raptors all season long, one of the big assets for them was their bench. And, Anunoby, people forget, has not been in this. They traded away Wright. Van Vliet has really been not a factor until recently, and you wonder if what he can add and Ibaka can add, and then Norm Powell, he really added stuff. He did nothing in the Sixers series, but those three guys really had an underrated, nice series against the Bucks.
They did. That's when the series really flipped, is when those three guys got it going, and they flipped from being a deficit to an advantage. When they were behind against Milwaukee in those first couple of games, their bench was just being destroyed. Then they got it to about even, and then those last couple of games, their bench really was able to come in and turn games. And Van Vliet's not going to shoot the way he did those last few games against the Bucks. That's just not realistic. You can't have any expectation of that. But he can make some plays here, but he's going to have to shoot the ball well because he's going to struggle defensively. They're going to target him and go after him. So if he's shooting the ball, that's where he can make a big difference. And then you mentioned Ibaka and then Norm Powell. Those guys are going to be important too, especially Powell, because that's another defender you run at Thompson and Curry, and those are the kind of guys you need to make a difference.
All right, Keith, let's look at some other NBA stories because there's a ton of them, even with the finals. First off, before we get to those, your prediction for the NBA Finals is?
Warriors in 6.
Warriors in 6. All right, that starts tomorrow night right here on 97.3 ESPN. We've got Game 1. Coverage begins at 8 o'clock. All right, Rockets making just about everybody available, it seems like, other than James Harden. How different do you anticipate the Rockets looking, and will there be takers for CP3?
Yeah, I don't think that contract's going to be moved, and I call it a contract because that's not all Chris Paul is, but in terms of anybody trading for him, that's what matters. It's such a big number out there, especially a couple of years from now, that's just not palatable for most teams to take on. He's still a great player, and that's fine, but that's going to be the hard thing. If they're going to move anybody, it's probably going to be Clint Capella. But even his value, we're starting to see guys like him. Unfortunately, teams are looking at it as, if I'm acquiring him, well, I'm acquiring him because I assume I'm a team that's going to make a deep playoff run. And can he be on the floor when I make that deep playoff run? So that's going to be a question as well. So I don't expect them to look overly different. They'll make a bunch of moves around the edges of the rotation. As far as their main guys, I don't see a path towards them moving those guys unless it's something really unexpected.
Of the stuff that has gone on with the Lakers in the last couple of days, I mean, do you think that any of this is a deterrent to free agents?
Yeah, I do in the short term. I think in the long term, they're fine. They're still the Lakers. It's still Los Angeles. But I think you're going to have, a lot of guys with a lot of questions. It's already tough. There's guys who don't want to go there and play with LeBron James because that brings with it a whole different set of expectations, and you're number 2. Now, then you factor in, all right, well, I'm signing with a general manager who may not be here in a year. I'm signing with a team who has a coach that we all kind of think that could go a different way if Vogel gets let go after a year or two. And then all of a sudden now the guys who brought you there aren't there anymore. And that's tough for a player to go after. So I think they might have a little bit of trouble this season, getting that star player that they've been looking for around LeBron James.
Adam Silver said that they'll figure it out. Do you think that they will? Quickly.
Yeah, I think they will. Yeah, for sure. They're going to get it done. They're going to make it happen.
All right.
Eventually.
All right. I don't know. I'm almost wondering if some of the players around the league are enjoying watching LeBron suffer in this whole situation.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of that, but I think, again, at the end of the day, it's the Lakers, it's L.A. L.A. is one of the few places. Markets don't matter like they used to in the NBA, but L.A. does because, 90% of the league lives there or within driving distance of there, in the off season, and guys, that's still a place guys do want to be.
All right, Anthony Davis reportedly meeting with David Griffin today. Your percentage chance that Davis comes around and says, you know what? I might want to stay here and play with Zion.
Somewhere between 5 and 10. I think, once the player's gotten this far down the road of, I don't want to be there, and they've then kind of doubled down on it through the media, I think that is, likely to result in a trade. But, if anybody can convince him, it's David Griffin and crew. I think, maybe they'll do some talking and try to get him there. It's not the worst thing in the world that if he stays there, because they can offer him the deal, and then you could address all this a year from now if you want. But I still think he's likely to be traded.
Last thing with Keith Smith here. Always good. We'll talk to Keith on Wednesdays, of course, throughout the basketball season into the draft and the offseason. A lot of fun with that. I'm wondering how many people are more interested in the offseason than they are these NBA finals, which I think a lot of people feel the Warriors are going to win. But what about this R.J. Hampton story and what happens with that? He ends up going to play. But for the people out there who don't know, he's a top end, high school player who would have been probably a lottery pick. He decides to go play in New Zealand, and he's going to do that for a year and then enter the draft next year. Is that the first domino that more players will do this? Or, we've seen others do it before, but that was academic reasons. This is a smart kid who could have gone to Duke. He could have gone to pretty much any of the top flight places and decided that's not for me. Do we think the NBA is keeping a close eye on this?
Yeah, we're starting to see, more guys consider alternate paths to the league, and you mentioned it's usually because of academic reasons, but I think with R.J. Hampton, his decision was made. One, the Australian League, where the New Zealand Breakers play, has committed a lot of money to these bringing in foreign-born players, and that's something that they said that they're open to. They really want to be that home away from home for guys who don't want to go to college. That's something that they're open to becoming, and that's where they want to go. So I think what you're looking at there is, you're looking at if you're Hampton, it's all right. Well, it's a chance to make some money, play in a good league. It's the equivalent to a lot of the higher end college leagues. It's not quite the ACC, but maybe a level down and start things that way. And I can train and be a pro and work with, trainers and coaches from day one. Now, the league, it's something the league is monitoring, and there's a lot of pressure to get rid of the one and done, to allow kids to go to college, declare for the draft, go undrafted, but still go back to college. That's a change I think the NBA would really love to see, so that you don't have all these kids flooding the G League and then flooding overseas leagues and then really washing out that way. So it's going to be interesting because a lot's going to change down that path, and it's going to be up to the Players Association, the NBA, and ultimately the NCAA to come to some form of agreement that's workable, because otherwise I think this is an avenue that you could start to see more players take advantage of over the next couple of years.
All right, Keith Smith, he likes the Warriors in 6. We'll see it all unfold tomorrow night. You can hear Game 1 on 97.3 ESPN, your home of the NBA Finals, at Keith Smith NBA, Yahoo, Real GM, and, of course, the offseason will be here. And I know, Keith, you are looking forward to breaking all that down as well. Odds are, according to Vegas, that Jimmy Butler and Tobias Harris will be back in Philly. So we'll see how those odds play out, and we'll talk about it all coming up right here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline with Keith Smith. Thanks, pal.
Thank you.
All right, Keith Smith's back next week. He, like all guests, appear via the Boardwalk Honda Hotline.